Season 4 of Notebook on Cities and Culture is brought to you by Daniel Murphy, Polar Inertia, a journal of nomadic and popular culture online at polarinertia.com, and by Press Up, friendly web consultants who listen to your goals and provide solutions that make sense. Online at pressupinc.com. There's one location that I've seen come up every so often in your work, and it's a Los Angeles place that's both well-known and not well-known. It's MacArthur Park. What does MacArthur Park mean to you? What is that place to you?
I've photographed in MacArthur Park, and I photographed MacArthur Park for clients, for commissions, and then also for personal work. And it's a very complicated place. It's the people that live there now are mostly Central American recent immigrants, their families, but it has a long history. I found out, a couple years ago that it used to be the art district of Los Angeles. I think Otis used to be located there, and there was a lot of studios and galleries there. It's not like that at all anymore. Almost. I imagine there's some artists living there, but. It kind of is. It's a good place to start talking about Los Angeles because it's almost, it has something about Los Angeles that I find really interesting, which is that it's a little bit beyond any laws, beyond any organization. It's just it's a very organic place. I mean, you go there are people. There's a lake, in the park, and there are people there fishing for food.
I was thinking about that the other day. Like, are there even fish in there? There must be if they keep fishing.
They are. And I see people there fishing, and I was talking to our friend Jesse the other day, and I said, "Do you think people fish for food?" And he says, "Yeah, people fish for food," and it's fascinating. You'll see a person standing on the corner with a megaphone, just going on and on about Christ or whatever. I don't know. It's an interesting place with a lot of history and a lot of future, I think. So
we're sitting just a few miles west of MacArthur Park here in Koreatown on Notebook on Cities and Culture today, where I'm speaking with Noé Montes. He's a photographer whose work has appeared in magazines. He's done work for nonprofits, for advertising agencies, for all sorts of clients. But I came to know him through his work on Los Angeles, seeing MacArthur Park, of course, seeing all kinds of other places, because there's a sense in which no two places look alike here in Los Angeles. I was interviewing another photographer here who lives just a few miles west of here, in fact, but he's more known as an international photographer. Occasionally takes shots of Los Angeles, but I asked him, it's more like I was just assuming. I was saying, Los Angeles is such a photographable place, just inherently photographable. And he was like, I never thought of it that way. He didn't think it was photographable. He just happened to live here. But then he thought, maybe it is. He realized how much he had actually shot here and how much there is to shoot, but he hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, how do you think of the photographability of Los Angeles? Is it just sort of naturally photographable?
Yeah, absolutely. Los Angeles is. There are the obvious things that we all kind of think about Los Angeles. The light. The sunsets, the light here is beautiful. It's gorgeous. Sunsets and palm trees. All of these things are obviously tropes of photography that we all know, and they are true. It's true. It is that beautiful, and the light is that amazing.
What is actually different about the light here, working with it versus the light, I don't know, up in San Francisco or on the East Coast?
So one thing that I'd say that is different about the light here versus the East Coast is that the light here seems to be warmer, and hence it's a little more yellow. It's the light on the East Coast to me is a little crisper and a little bit more blue, a little bit harder, and here it just seems a little bit more open, a little bit looser. The light itself actually seems to me like it's that way, but I guess that's one thing. But at the same time, there's such a variety of light here at any time of the day. Go outside, camera in hand or not, and just if you look at the light, it's just I don't know. It's really interesting. It's really gorgeous. Overall, it's got a warmth, I think, that I personally really like. So that's it about light. About Los Angeles itself. Los Angeles is interesting because it's not even as much as it's known to be that place with the palm trees and the sunsets and the beaches. It's actually I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's kind of ugly, and it's something that I think about a lot.
Compared to what city is it ugly?
It's ugly compared to, say, San Francisco, which is, I don't know. It seems like there's a lot of history there. It's kind of well maintained. I'm sure parts of San Francisco aren't, but generally you go there and it seems like it's cleaner. It's more. It's more kept,
I guess I did see a lot of trash on the ground as I just had to walk up Western a mile and a half from home to here to your studio, and I was just like, man, why is it so dirty?
It is dirty. It's funny. My wife and I were having coffee one day in a coffee shop up here in Vermont, and we're reading the magazine, and the gentleman sitting next to us just started talking to us, and it turned out that he was from New York, and he was here on business. Like, he had some business, I think, in Hollywood that he had a meeting for, and he was asking us about LA and why we like it and stuff, and
just all of a sudden, why do you like? Why do you like Los Angeles?
All of a sudden, he started talking to us. So, at some point, he looked around and he goes, "I just don't get it. It's ugly." And he kind of, he waved his arm around, like in front of us, like in the street, like, look at it. And I really couldn't argue with him. I mean, I looked around and it was just asphalt and, dirty trees and, and I couldn't argue with him. But at the same time, I felt like I didn't want to argue with him. I didn't want to defend LA. I just feel like its beauty is in, I don't know, it's in its people, really.
Yes, and that's true of any place. It's it's true of San Francisco. Maybe the real interest is more in the people than in the structures. Even though the structures are on postcards, the bridges and whatnot. You don't go to San Francisco for the bridges unless you're a tourist. And in Los Angeles, there's not much you come here to see if you're a tourist, and they're not very attractive sites if you do come as a tourist. The Walk of Fame, whatever, Universal City, but. Los Angeles frees you from having to defend anything about it, really. I mean, there's no burden to stand up for Los Angeles. You never really feel that, do you?
No, I don't. I definitely. I feel like if you don't, I feel like if you don't like Los Angeles, there's probably some personal issue that you need to work on. For yourself. I don't feel like I need to defend Los Angeles. I do want to talk about why I appreciate it, which is the fact that there's so much here. I mean, whatever your level of interest is in society or the human condition or whatever it is, it's here. If your interest is the built environment, I mean, Jesus, look around. Los Angeles has so much going on. There's so much history, and at the same time, there's a little bit of a disdain for history that I actually, not that I like it, but I think that it makes things interesting. I know in cities like New York, there is a very, very strong movement, will to keep things, as they are. I mean, it's really hard to build new stuff, and here, people, don't really care. So things get torn down and built up every time, and usually a lot of times it's not anything significant that's going up. It's just building. It's just a place for people to live or transact whatever they need to do. It's interesting. So in that way, it's very dynamic. The built environment here is very dynamic. There's constantly things going down and up, and it changes a lot. So we were speaking earlier about Borges and Los Angeles as a metaphor for an Aleph, or Los Angeles being an Aleph itself, and that was one thing that when I first came here about 12 years ago now, struck me as being true. I mean, this place is...
You thought of Borges when you got here?
Absolutely. I mean, I read Borges, and specifically the story of the Aleph, when I was very young, and it's something that that stayed with me, that has stayed with me, and continues to reassert itself in my my mind as a theme, a concept of life itself. So when I came here, I was struck by how Los Angeles is an Aleph, is a place where everything that has ever existed, that now exists, that will exist in every part of the world, in every part of our reality, is manifest, really, and I, at some point I had some idea to go around the city and photograph it block by block, realizing that, I mean, it was just one of these impossible,
lifetime task.
But I think that's kind of what I liked about the idea. But I also thought that by the time I got finished with the task, when I went back to the beginning, say, I'm working kind of in a spiral, or, in some sort of pattern where I end up at the beginning, or a loop, I guess, the beginning would be different, and you would have to start again. So I like that. I kind of enjoy that about LA. It just, it's constantly shifting, constantly changing. That's the built environment, of LA.
It's no coincidence, I assume, that the press you started is called Aleph Books.
Right, Aleph Books. As I was saying, it's a story that really struck me. It really, I mean, almost, it gave me a synoptic vision. It was almost, I hesitate to say it, but it was almost like a spiritual awakening through literature, I guess, where it really opened my mind up to so many things beyond my life, beyond my reality at the time. I don't know, 20 years ago, more than that, when I first read it. It's something that I've been pursuing through photography, through other things in my life, and like I said, when I came to LA, I was like, oh, this is the place where I need to be to explore this.
Yeah, so this concept is alive here in Los Angeles.
Here, yes, definitely.
I do wonder how anybody who hasn't read that story really comes to an understanding of Los Angeles. But I think back to the New Yorker who said, I just don't get it. And that's a pretty common sentiment. I mean, even people who live here, who've been here 30 years, might say they don't get it. And there's a couple different strategies, more than a couple, to try to find your own understanding of Los Angeles. One I often hear is to look at it from above. Usually that means go to the Griffith Observatory, look down, go to the Getty Center, look down, go to, the Bonaventure, and look out of the revolving restaurant, I don't know. But you have, of course, been in a helicopter, taken photographs of Los Angeles. One of them is up there on the wall, cut out of the newspaper, in fact. Tell me what understanding that gives you. Was that the first time you had been in, from a plane you can't tell much. From a helicopter, it's a whole different story, right?
Right. So, how that came about was that the LAPD, which is somebody that I work with, is one of my clients, they asked me if I would go up in a helicopter to take photos of the city for some printed material that they needed.
It seems like an automatic yes.
Oh my God. My answer was like, can we go now? Like, I was just like, when do you want to do this? Yes, please.
Where's the helipad? Yeah. I'm going to it.
Not only that, though, of course, I immediately said yes, and we set up the date and went up. I prepared as best as I could. I'd never photographed from a helicopter. But once we were up there, I realized that they were pretty much looking to me for a lead as to where to go and what I wanted.
They didn't have a plan.
They did not have a plan, and I thought that maybe there was a some sort of path that they normally took, and that I would just kind of go along and photograph what I could see from there. but it was very much like you tell us where you want to go, what you want to shoot, and we'll take you there. And we did it, and we did that over a couple of days. We went up twice for a couple hours each time, and it was amazing. It was amazing.
Did they start from downtown, the police station,
So,
or
the helipad for the LAPD is downtown. Just what is it? It's just east of Union Station.
Oh, okay.
Like if you're on the 101 going east, like right where they all converge there, it's right north of there. You can see it. It's right by the river, right by the LA River. So we went up there, and I mean, it was what an opportunity, you know. It was a chance of a lifetime. Photography, I've talked about this before, but photography is kind of, you're looking through a frame, arranging the world into some sort of composition, and the way that you see all the elements in the frame, and you're basically moving the camera around till everything is resolved. And to be able to do that on such a large scale, to be able to have the city be the canvas and the point of focus, the camera, be up in a helicopter and be able to say move this way, move that way, up, down. I don't think I'd ever even considered that was something I'd ever do. So it was great.
Yeah, it's given the variety of Los Angeles, it seems like there's two ways to think about it visually. Either you can look at just one part of it, isolate a part, cut off other parts, and see just this one part you're focusing on at the moment, or you can see as much as possible at once. Those are the two scales at which Los Angeles works, the very macro and the very micro. Do you think that's true?
That's true, because between those is kind of well, I mean, of course, that depends on what you consider the micro. I mean, obviously, it's something on a table. You could be looking at something like that, but it could
like
also
a block,
like a block, or like a person.
Yeah, definitely.
Outside of that, it's a little, I was talking about resolving things in the frame. It gets a little bit more difficult to resolve things in the frame outside of those two scales, because it's such an amalgam of things.
Right.
You know what I mean? So those are the two ways that you would generally look at it. But I think that when it gets interesting is outside of that, and I've actually done this exercise where I almost don't compose. I just point the camera at some dirty part of LA, and then when you take some time to study those images, there's a lot of information there, and that again, back to the built environment. That's something that's really interesting. The layering of information. If you just, go out on the street and look in any direction, and this is very true of where we live here in Koreatown and this part of the city. There are layers upon layers of cultures and ethnicities, just histories, lives, and they're all there. They're all apparent if you just take the time to look at them, or for them.
And what do you learn about the way the city fits together, whether you're looking at either of these scales? Obviously, if you're up above, you see the patterns, but from photographing the city, what do you learn about how it does fit together rather than how it doesn't fit together, if you know what I mean?
Well, how it does fit together, I don't know. Los Angeles is known for being a city with no center, so it's kind of a collection of places. It's grown very organically, and that's one thing that's interesting about it. It fits. I don't know that it fits together. In a way, it's still pretty segregated. Obviously, south of the 10 is where a lot of minorities live, Hispanic and Black people, historically, and that still hasn't changed.
Two groups that sometimes don't get along that great historically.
Yeah, two groups that don't get along that great, but nevertheless live together. I mean, by chance, by necessity. That is where people can afford rent. That is where people can afford to buy a home. Because, as you know, the real estate market in Los Angeles is so inflated, and it quickly came back from the recession, and we're back to ridiculous prices. I mean, there's a house 2 blocks from here that's $1.5 million. That is not like a luxury neighborhood. It's just a regular neighborhood. It doesn't fit together, but it is connected. It's connected through our metro system, which, as lacking as it is, nevertheless, it's used by tons of people. And
that's lacking all the time.
That's lacking all the time. I actually do some work for the MTA.
Oh yes.
And
they're very good about putting up photographs. It seems like
they are. They want to. I think that they want to promote the work that they're doing, which is in fact go to work. Working with them has taught me. I've learned quite a bit about their projects, and they are actually connecting the city.
Right.
It's going to be a long time, but it's in the works. It's happening, and obviously they want to promote that. But there are 2 lines going out all the way west that are going in, and bus lines all over the city, and it's just not as effective as, say, New York City. You can't hop on a train and be somewhere in 20 minutes. You need an hour,
right.
to or at least to get to your destination.
Be downtown in 10 minutes. I do that pretty often, or Hollywood in 15 minutes.
It's true. I mean, it works very well for the parts where there are trains, basically.
Yeah.
But this city's so spread out. How are you going to put trains throughout the city? I don't see it happening. But they are. The MTA is doing good work, and I look forward to the day where I can hop on a train and be in the beach.
Right. Yeah.
No.
It's not that long away. I mean, there's Santa Monica late next year probably, which means to me maybe early 2016.
Yeah. The exposition line is is happening.
Yes.
So, but back to your question about how the city fits together. I don't know. I don't know that it fits together that well. It's still an amalgam of, just pockets of communities. I guess it fits together more in another sense. There's a lot of people here doing interesting work in communities all over the city. Work that is helping, underprivileged children, all of these things. That is something that I see throughout the city. And that is something that's interesting to me. I mean, the thing that really energizes me about Los Angeles is the people and the things that they are doing. As interesting as the built environment is, what I really gravitate to is the people, their individual stories, and the things that they are doing. There's a lot of good work being done in the city.
What was your awareness of Los Angeles growing up in the agricultural parts of California? Like, was it a place that was in your consciousness much?
It wasn't, actually. So my awareness of Los Angeles was, I had family here, and but we rarely saw them. The one thing I do remember was that there was at the time, there was a lot of, and there still is a lot of gang culture in LA. So in the places where I lived, there was a lot of people that would move out of Los Angeles to get away from that. So a lot of young kids that I knew, that's where they were coming from.
To places like where? Where were you living?
To places like Stockton, Lodi, which, I mean, there's a lot of gang culture there, in Stockton especially. And I also lived in Arizona, in Yuma, Arizona. That's where I went to high school. So I remember that being a place where a lot of people moved out of LA too. Because of the agriculture, there's a lot of lettuce there. So families would move there to work in the lettuce harvest. and they would move out of LA because I guess that's more than anything. That was my impression of it. There was a place that
people escaped from. They
people
fled.
escaped from. Yes, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and even I don't know, like I guess I knew that movies were made here, but I didn't think about it that much. It was not that big in my life, I think.
So were you already taking pictures? Were you already a photographer in some sense when you were growing up in California, or when you were in Arizona, or was that later?
That was actually a bit later. I didn't come to photography early on in my life. I was working as an electronic technician, and I found the work boring, so I took a course, in the evenings at a community college in Arizona, just to have something to do. It was a photography course, and really that's kind of where it grew from. I really liked it almost immediately. I realized that it was a really good way for me to understand the world and to say whatever I had to say about it. So, and now I'm actually, at this point in my life, I'm getting back to some of those things that were part of my early life through photography.
What were the first places you were shooting then in Arizona, or what sort of locations did you really start ramping it up in? What was it there in Arizona? Was it later?
It was in Arizona, actually, and it was photo of the desert. I think there's a tradition in photography. There's a lot of people that work in the desert freely.
Photographable place.
It's a photographable place, So that's where I started shooting, and really because that's where I was, and that's where I was living. But yeah, at the same time, to this day, I love the desert. I love driving out of LA into the desert. It's great. Yeah, that was kind of where I started shooting. And it's still similar themes that I've developed over time. People, their stories. Yeah.
It's kind of, not even kind of, I mean, it's definitely one of the striking parts of this city that you're so close to the desert. You can get to this place where no one is so quickly, from a place where a lot of people are. I mean, why is it important that the desert is there? Why is it important for sort of the nature of Los Angeles that there's that whole vast, dry place over there?
Oh, well, it's important to me is that it's great to get out of here. I feel like we're talking about Los Angeles and what a great place it is, and we keep talking about the not so great parts of it, but I mean it's an intense experience to live here. It's really incredibly stimulating, and just it's very dynamic. So it's nice to move away from that easily, and that's actually really a great thing about LA, that you can be in a completely different environment in a matter of an hour. Less than that. Drive up north, past Selmar, and all of a sudden you're in Chaparral, I guess. Actually, LA is that environment. It's Chaparral and desert, but it's in a way it's amazing that this city is here. I mean, there's much has been written about the fact that LA became what it has become because of the fact that there was no water here, and to this day we have to get it pumped in. So I don't know, it's amazing. It's if you kind of look back even or take a perspective that's even larger than being in a helicopter, and you look at this place, it's an odd place to have developed where it has, and at the same time, it's a really beautiful place. It's really great that there is this city on the coast, and there's so much. This is a laboratory, really.
And you were in New York just before you came here. I mean, what did having that contrast teach you about the two cities, the two major cities in America, the two biggest cities here? Being able to experience them sort of back to back, what did that teach you?
Well, let me see. So, one thing that I don't want to fall into is comparing the cities as, one is better than the other, because they're obviously very different places. They're both very complex places. I'm originally from California, so I kind of feel like I have this West Coast personality, which is a little bit, a kind of easygoing and open to what is happening, and I like space, obviously. That was one thing that was different in New York, was that the lack of space and the pace of life there was really it was really fast. I learned a lot about people, actually, in that sense. I came from this place where things have to be done a certain way, or at least that's the way I kind of thought about it. That one thing follows another, and there's a procedure to things, and you finish one thing, you wrap that up, and then you move on to the next thing. And when I was in New York, that totally went out the window. Almost immediately, I was like, "Oh, you can't do that here," because it's a machine, and it just kind of it keeps moving forward, whether you're ready or not, and it's something that you have to kind of like you're struggling to kind of keep up. Like I said, at some point I had found a space for myself, made a little bit of a space, and it's a really interesting. New York is a really interesting place. It really changed my outlook on life, on art, on culture, and so many things. So when I moved back west, I moved to Los Angeles, and I had a bit of a sense of relief of actually having space, of seeing the sky, of there seems to be more of a sense of possibility in Los Angeles than in New York, at least to me. In Los Angeles, you can decide that you want to pursue something, and then go about doing that. With an ease,
right that day.
Yeah, with an ease that that's hard to find in New York. Yeah, exactly. Like that day, you can be like, "This is what I'm going to do." You decide to do it, and you go about pursuing it. I feel like in New York it's a little bit harder to do that, especially, as we were saying before, if you don't have a lot of money. It's really hard to do that. So they're very different places. Also, at this point, I feel like Los Angeles is New York seems to be a much more established place, and hence, it's not as dynamic as I consider Los Angeles to be right now. It seems like the things that are coming out of New York are established. They're good things, but they seem to be a little bit of more of the same. Whereas in LA, there's a much more variety of ideas, of culture, and I feel like it's a young city, obviously, and right now I think some of those things are there's some what I want to say. There is some of the things that are going to define LA's personality, LA's culture, are right now being established. Right. I think that in this moment in time, there are a lot of things that are happening that are going to be defined LA more.
You get to see the city be made now, which is not true of a lot of cities in the world.
Right, because it's a young city. Right now, there's a lot of stuff happening that I feel are going to... I mean, this has always been the case for every city, but for some reason, there's a moment right now in LA that I feel is kind of is something that we're going to look back on and say that began then. That came out of all of these things, and I don't know. Maybe it's just me because I'm alive right now.
There's always that possibility, but it does seem that way, doesn't it?
It does. I feel that is true. It's a good place to be. I mean, I really enjoy LA. I love this city. I love everything. Yeah, I mean, I love everything about it. Really, the good parts and the bad parts. I feel like it's a laboratory for the world.
Was it here that you converted to being a photographer full time?
It was, yeah. It was here. I was pursued photography part-time and mostly for personal, worked on personal projects for a long time. And then, I did photo-related jobs for a long time. But, it was here that I just, again, the idea of possibility, of being able to actually pursue something here. I was able to make that leap and say, this is what I want to be doing. So I'm gonna pursue it, and thankfully it has worked out to some extent. I'm not obviously where I'd like to be, because that's a process that is a process of growth that is constantly happening. But yeah, it was here, and all the materials that I needed for it were here.
How long did it take for you to discover that you had everything you needed here to be doing this all the time? So I think the way it happened was that probably about 7 years ago, I made the decision to stop all other work and just pursue photography and hopefully make a living from it. And in about 5 years, I'd say I got comfortable enough to actually allow myself to think that it was going to be okay. And then in the last couple of years, I've really come to see that there's just really nothing else I could be doing. Yes. You realize you didn't have a choice. At the end, you find, this is all I could have done.
This is all I could have done, and at the same time, I have a sense now that it's going to be okay. That it's only going to grow, and personally, that puts me in such a great place. I feel like I can breathe, and also very, very excited for the possibilities, that are in front of me.
There's that sense of momentum, and I feel like it's with the city as well as personally. Like people, of course, I didn't live here in the 70s or 80s or even 90s, but at that time, I think people in Los Angeles were like a little bit concerned about whether the city was even going to be standing 10 years from then, right? It's like, what's going on here? Why is there so much crime? Why do we, the complaints about Los Angeles were more about real things back then. Now there's a lot of complaints still, but they're sometimes about things that are getting solved. Back then, it seems like the very existence of the city was, all those movies in the 90s, these disaster movies where Los Angeles got flattened every year at the box office. You'd see Volcano, or I'm trying to think of what some of the other ones were, but I just remember Los Angeles being about to fall apart was a really big theme in the culture. Now, though, it seems like the city itself has the same attitude as you do about your career, like, oh yeah, things are moving forward, there is a momentum now. I mean, do you get that sense?
I do, and I think it's because of the people that I've met, and the people that I know are here, and the things that they are doing that I've learned about through photography. That's one of the things that I love about photography: the extraordinary access, to be nosy, really, about what people do, and I get to go into people's homes and look at their things, and at the same time talk to them and learn about what they're doing. But there's so much happening here. There is this idea to build a Central Park type park on top of the freeway. Do you know about this?
Which freeway is it going to be on top of?
Right here on the 101, the Hollywood freeway. I mean, it's kind of it's a very far-flung idea. But there are people working very seriously towards it, and there are people working towards, issues of public health are really big. I know that in New York, Bloomberg was someone who worked towards that. But now here in LA, there's a lot of work happening towards that, and it's great. This is where it should be happening. And this is where a lot of those problems are apparent, and it's a good place to work on those issues. And, as the rest of the country usually takes a lead from a lot of the things that are happening here. So there is a sense of momentum in Los Angeles because at least from my personal, experience, there's a lot of people doing a lot of work that to move. I mean, it's not. I don't think that anybody is saying let's move LA forward. I think that most of these people are just working with the idea of, issues about social justice need to be resolved, need to be moved forward. There, parallel to my own experience, all the materials are here. All the issues are here. They're apparent. They're obvious almost, and we have the will, we have the knowledge, the energy to make these things happen.
They just need to be organized. All the parts are around.
Yeah.
The components are there. They've been there.
Yeah, they've been there, and there are a lot of people in communities all over LA, that young people that go off to college and have decided that what they want to do is come back to their community and help make the place better. I see and talk and work with these people all the time. Pacoima, East LA, Venice, all over the place, and that really gives me heart. It really gives me energy, and it makes me happy. It makes me glad to be here at this time.
I like the way of putting it. You need a reason to be nosy, an excuse to be nosy, to find out about these things. It's the same with interviewing as photography, I guess. You find out what people are doing because you have some legitimizing reason to do that. But what are some of the early stories of what people were doing that you found out about anywhere that made you realize this was a good way to discover those stories, through photography, through whatever you were doing? What were some people or some things people were doing that you found out about early that you were like, there's a lot more than I realized going on, that's actually going on?
Well, through photography, photography is something that people need for promotion. So people would reach out to me and say, hey, we need some pictures for our website, etc. And not knowing very much about that organization or those people, I'd go out and meet them and learn about what they're doing. And this still happens. This happens all the time. But one of the groups that I work with is in Pacoima. They're called You Speak Collective, and they're an organization that provides services for young people, so that those people don't get involved in gangs and drugs, and maybe can get away from some of the bad things in their lives. And they offer parenting classes, visual arts, media arts, gardening, agriculture, all of these programs. And just seeing them and learning about them was great. I was really, really happy and glad to be working with them. But this is true to this day. I mean, I feel like all of us walk around not knowing all of the great work that's happening in the city. Every day I learn about stuff like this. I recently worked with the Community Arts Partnership, which is an organization out of Cal Arts, and they have a program for youth art, for youth that's based around arts, performance art. And I photographed an event for them, in the last month. And I was just amazed at the level of talent of the young people in the city. I was like, is this true? Do these people live here?
Right.
These teenagers playing L. Shankar compositions, or just these amazingly complex pieces of music, and just being so incredibly talented, and just their craft is so honed, and at the same time they're just like 15-year-olds, just kids who are just goofy kids, and living their lives as they should, and this organization finds this talent, and in a very short period of time, puts them together with a bunch of other talented young people, and puts these performances on that not only is their talent on display, but they also get to issues about race, about politics, about the city. They perform music, and they have plays, theater, all of these things, and all of those things come together, and that's the kind of energy that LA has, and through photography, I have the opportunity to see these things and experience these things. Yesterday I photographed an organization in Boyle Heights, which uses photography to empower young women. It's called Las Fotos Project, and they use photography to have young women, see the world differently and express themselves, and it's great. And there are thousands of these things happening throughout the city every day, and it's great to actually have an opportunity to experience them.
Photography takes you to those people, but also to I'm sure places you've never been near in Los Angeles before. It makes me think, I've never actually had one of the sort of a regular commute day job in Los Angeles, but I can see why. If somebody they lived in one place, they worked in one place, and they just knew the sort of freeway commute between them every day, day in and day out. It's like, no wonder they hate it here. Yeah. They know so little of it, and their world shrinks. This is something you see go on with a lot of people, right?
It's true. It's true. I feel very lucky in that, as you say, photography has taken me all over the city. Literally all over the city, to some desert home out in, way up in the San Fernando Valley, to some architecture masterpiece or case study homes. I've seen tons of those. Been down all the way to the South Bay, Torrance. I don't think, I'd probably been to almost all parts of the city, and thanks to photography, and it's great. Again, I'm very thankful. I feel very blessed to have had this experience and to continue to have this experience. And I've seen all levels of the social strata. Like, I've seen very, very poor people, to very, very wealthy people. I've also done some production work where I'm not photographing, but I'm working on photo shoots for other people, where it's I've seen enormous amounts of money being spent on something as ephemeral as a catalog that you're going to receive in the mail and throw away probably. But nevertheless, hundreds of thousands of dollars going into this, and that's kind of amazing to see. It's kind of it's slightly depressing, but
the sheer amount of resources being thrown at this one little thing.
Yeah, at this one little thing. Whereas especially because I have such a wide experience of the city, I would love to see those resources being, used for something better. Nevertheless, it's a part of our lives, and it's a part of the city. We haven't even touched upon the Dream Factory over here,
Yeah, there's that whole thing.
Yeah, there's that whole thing. But I've had an opportunity to see all of that, and I don't know. I feel like going back to the concept of Los Angeles being an Aleph, Los Angeles is a metaphor for all of life. It has its particulars, and every place in the world, every city, every relationship that people could possibly have. I'm sure it happens here. So it really is all here, and it's always shifting, and it's always interesting. And for me, it's just a perfect combination of place and thing to be doing in life, photography, to be able to see that. I've seen things here that I look forward to having the resources, the ridiculous resources one day to recreate.
What's one of those things?
Well, one of the things would be, when I first moved here, I moved to Koreatown, which is I live close here, so I'm kind of back here again. Although I've never really left the small triangle of Koreatown, East Hollywood, in the 12, 13 years that I've been here. But I moved here from New York with not a lot of money, and Koreatown is one of the places where you can move to. It's like ground zero for integration in the city. There are tons of immigrants from all over the world here, Africa and Indian, Pakistani, Bangladeshi, Koreans, obviously, but from all over the city. I just happened to be coming from New York, and I was an American, but I was part of that, integration into the city at the time. And I remember living in Koreatown on 4th and Kenmore, not far from here, and I went to the food for less that is over there in Westlake. And I saw a family that I imagine they were from Africa, a mom and dad and 2 children, and they were all holding hands, and they were in the food for less. If you've ever been in a food for less, it's just like a warehouse of food. And there was a pyramid of cereal, up to the ceiling, and they were holding hands, staring at it. Wow. As I imagine that they had never seen anything like it. So that is one thing that I was just like, I was amazed by, just seeing them just staring at it, just kind of no words, just being like, what is this? This land of plenty.
Yes, I rarely see a pyramid of cereal to the ceiling either, but that's, if you can recreate that, you can get some Africans, you can get a warehouse, you can shoot it however you want.
Right, exactly. I need like Gucci ad money to make that happen.
It's gonna take, that fire hose of money to do that. When you're out in an unfamiliar place, in a different city, someplace you don't know so well, and even if you're down to sort of an iPhone camera, how do you approach an unfamiliar place, a setting you don't know so well, photographically, even just casually? How do you tend to work with that?
I guess the way that I approach that is, it's a very immediate and observational. I recently went to Mexico City, and I hadn't been to Mexico City in, I don't know, 10 years, maybe more. So it was very, very new, and it was very, again, well, Mexico City is like Los Angeles, it's just very.
I feel familiar in a lot of ways whenever I go.
Yes, so, there are a million things to photograph. And so I really, the way I approach it is, I have my camera, with me, and I just photograph whatever I see that for whatever reason tugs at me, and it could be any number of things. But I'll walk around, with a camera, and I actually make a point of doing this, going out with a camera, and just not thinking too much, just photographing the thing that catches my attention for whatever reason, and then I get to study those images, and that's how I learn.
It is. Yeah, Mexico City also strikes me as really just naturally photographable because there's so much. And people say Los Angeles is weird, but man, in Mexico City, the sights you see there, some of them I can't even describe very well. Like, I don't know what I'm looking at. But it's, what kinds of things do you see there?
Well, one thing that was kind of apparent in my recent trip to Mexico City was this idea of failed modernism.
Oh, yes.
There are, probably hundreds of these architectural, not masterpieces, but very interesting architectural works that have fallen into complete disrepair.
Yes, that's putting it mildly in some of these cases.
Yeah. And that is really interesting. I would love to go back to Mexico City and explore that more. One thing that was really interesting that I saw there was related to this. We have this idea of the 1% here in the United States, and the occupiers, Occupy LA, etc. Over there, it's actually literal. Like the occupiers will come in and take over a building, And I've seen this, and it was, I was lucky enough to have someone in Mexico City who was knowledgeable about these things and took me around, and we discussed some of the stuff. But it was explained to me that, he said, for example, that building right there, I was like, oh, that building, it's really interesting. Why is this so run down? It looks like there was a fire in part of it. You can see
is that the Condominio Insurgentes, the V-shaped one?
It's close to Condesa
It's
south of Condesa slightly?
It's that like 20-story tower, and the 19th floor is burned away.
Possibly, yeah.
That building, I always, no one ever wants to go up the stairs with me in that building, but I was talking to a guy who's been to raves there at the top floor.
Oh, really?
He's like, I didn't know where they were getting power.
Yeah.
I didn't know, like, why it was in here. It was dark all the way up the 20 flights of stairs, but he was like, it was great. I mean, I knew if another 1985 happened, we'd all be, this building is going to be coming down. But yeah, I think we're talking about the same building.
I think so, actually, yeah. I mean, but there's probably many of those buildings where they've been occupied.
Right.
Everybody that lives there is living there illegally at this point. Right. And it was also explained to me that at some point these people gain rights. And where I was staying when I was there was in Condesa, and I went to visit a friend there in his apartment. And he said, "Oh yeah, there's 12 units here. Eight out of the 12 units were originally occupiers.
Yeah.
And this is Condesa, where the European models go to get their Starbucks, Right. So it's changed quite a bit, yeah. But that is still true that people there do that, and that is something that happens there. It's amazing. So there are all these buildings there that are really interesting architecturally, and like I said, they're very run down. They're in a state of disrepair, but I feel like it says so much about modernism, about human aspirations, and where they end up clashing with reality.
Right. So, it's the brokenness of Los Angeles and Mexico City both get talked about a lot.
Yeah.
In a way, Mexico City, like on the surface, it seems more broken because there's these buildings that seem like they should have fallen down 20 years ago, and there's a lot of stuff is a mess there, but a lot of stuff works better. I mean, their metro is more extensive. Right. Plus, it's got those cool bright orange trains, which are very photographable. I'm sure you agree.
It's true. Yeah, the metro there is great. This time around, I actually didn't use the metro, but I have before, and it's effective. I went to a soccer game down in Azteca at the stadium, and I went from the Zocalo down there, and it was we got there in no time. It was great. It's really effective, and again, it's a really interesting part of the city, and it's a really big city. It's obviously it's an enormous city, and the metro works well. I mean, there's something to be said about that.
There's something to be learned from. It's like saying to another American city or even a European one that you can learn from Los Angeles. They're surprised at that. Saying to Los Angeles, you can learn from Mexico City.
Yeah.
That's surprising to people here too, right? They think, but how could we learn from Mexico City? This happens for a lot oftentimes with Mexican immigrants. They say, but we came to Los Angeles like we came from there. No, thank you, right? They sort of turn their backs on a lot of stuff.
No, it's true, but I mean, like Los Angeles, it's such a complex place. We're talking about how people from different places look at Los Angeles and Mexico City as such broken places that how could there possibly be something to learn from them? But obviously they are such complex places that there's a lot there. There's some stuff that works really, really well, and some stuff that just does not work at all. So of course you can learn from the stuff that works well. There's much to be said for learning from even from broken places, even from the things that don't work well. Obviously you can learn from why they don't work well, how is it that they came to be, all of these things. And
what do you find other people can learn about Los Angeles from photographs, whether it's yours or others, just purely from the medium of photography? What does it seem to you people can come to understand about this city?
Well, I guess my answer to that would be tied up in what is it that I try to capture about this city, because as I said, it's a place that I really love, that I really respect, that I find incredibly interesting. I think the thing that people can learn from photography about Los Angeles, so many things. I mean, one thing is this place itself. It's unique in the world. It's it's amazing in so many ways. I think what I would hope that people can see is that people are more alike than they are different, and that through a process of working out our issues, we can come to a better place as human beings, really, as human beings. Hopefully we can reach a better understanding of each other and of ourselves, and cut down on some of the bad parts of life. And I think again, Los Angeles has all the materials for to come to those, to work out those issues, to find solutions for that. And it's a little bit accelerated because we're all kind of crashing into each other here, So, it's there's some sparks flying, but if you kind of look beyond that, there's a lot of humanity. There's a lot of humanity, and I think that's maybe what I see and what I would like to show.
And it's been here in Los Angeles, specifically Koreatown, here in the city where we all crash into each other, that I've been speaking today to photographer Noé Montes. Noé, thanks so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. It's been a great conversation. Thank you.
Thank you. This has been Notebook on Cities and Culture. I've been Colin Marshall, and you listeners can keep up with the cultural creators, internationalists, and observers of the urban scene on the show at colinmarshall.org. Thanks. Special thanks to everyone who backed Season 4 on Kickstarter, including Joel Neville Anderson, Daniel Levin Becker, Paige Calvert, Commander Manvark, Jonathan Crow, John Cunningham, David Dawes, James DeVito, Tim Dobbs, Paul Doyle, Jake Elliott, Kevin Emmett, Lawrence English, Jonathan Filbert, Andrew Philippone Jr., Michael Fransky, John French, Themistocles Eucrucius, Will Graham, Umberto Grant, Samuel Hansen, David Hayes, Jeff Hillenbrand, Mark Hines, Andrew Johnstone, Tadeusz Andrzej Kodlubowski, Peter Kavanagh, Ted Kane, Andy Cooney, Evan Landman, Alfred Lee, James Maloney, Sean McDonald, Alberto Bruzos Moro, Jason Miller, Rob Montz, Daniel Murphy, Richard Nash, Aidan Nullman, Patrick O'Flaherty, Danny Olson, Michael O'Regan, Ian Blosker, Christopher Porter, MJ Pritchett, Piers Rippey, Rob Schultz, Todd Shimoda, Cam Smith, Deborah Smith, Adam Sutherland, Maureen Kincaid Speller, Anna Traher, Thomas Unterberger, Matt Warren, Nick Weigelt, Dion Wolf, Cynthia Yang, and Wayne Wright.